And that's when I realized, and that's when I was like, I need to make a change. And the day that I took responsibility, and I had no clue what that was going to look like, I had no clue. I was like, I need to figure out how to heal myself because the doctors have completely failed me. And because they just look at a diagnosis and then they look at what pill goes with that diagnosis, and that's what they do. And so it was up to me to figure out how can I heal myself. And that's what I was on a mission to do. And that's what I did. And it all started with responsibility. So that's how juicy good, despite how unpopular it is these days, that is how juicy good it is.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't. And we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Bertone. And if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. My guest today on Truth Tastes Funny is Holly Bertone. Holly is a certified holistic health coach, a motivational speaker, a #1 Amazon best-selling author, and the host of Your Comeback Story podcast. And Holly's expertise is as a midlife comeback coach for professional women over 40, but hopefully she'll give me some comeback advice as well. Holly, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness. Thanks so much, Hirsch, for having me on. And it's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. The first question I want to ask, and it sounds like maybe an obvious question, but I think you're the expert. What is a comeback?
Oh, such a great question to start with, because I think so often we're programmed to view the comeback as this big event or this big adversity. But what happens is that, especially by the time, we get into our 30s and 40s and 50s, we just have years of accumulated stress that just adds up. And then at one point we wake up and every day is Groundhog Day. And it's the same day, just a different event and a different adversity. So it's not always coming back from the big stuff. It's just this accumulation of being able to, as we've become disconnected from ourselves, as we have all of this accumulated stress, and typically as we've let our health go in the process, to come back home to you. And I love the 80s movies. What was your favorite 80s movie?
Well, I just heard Molly Ringwald on a podcast, so
Ooh.
I think I would think of 16 Candles being one of my favorites.
Yeah, good one. So let's even actually go back a little bit further to the 70s, right?
Okay.
The original comeback movie was Rocky. We can get into the Rocky framework here in a few
yes.
minutes. But like so that's where I think the comeback started. And then the 80s just perfected it, the 80s movie montage. But that's how we're trained to view the comeback. Like in 3 minutes, all of a sudden we go from just being this average person to having a challenge in front of us. And, and we're coming out of this 80s movie montage, Jennifer Beals, we got our leg warmers on and, we've painted the fence with Karate Kid. So we're ready to go. And we get excited to do this comeback, to be like, you know what, I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to get healthier. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to exercise. And we want to do the thing and we get excited to do the thing. But then we run into this like New Year's resolution cycle, was at 92%. But it doesn't have to be New Year's. It's like any day we go to start the thing, but then it's like, I call it the base camp cycle, because we get this, like we start at the base of the mountain. We want to climb the mountain, right? We get excited and then we start climbing the mountain, and that excitement lasts about 2 weeks. And then what happens is that the thing gets hard. We get discouraged. And then we're like, okay, I'm going to rely on willpower now. Willpower is going to get you one more week. And then you're like, you know what? The thing is hard. I've got this. It's a rainy day. Someone's running late. I got to fight with my spouse. I'm just going to start on Monday. And then Monday never happens. And instead of climbing the mountain, we're right back at base camp. And that's what I just see over and over and over again.
Yeah. And when you think about it, we haven't become any more patient either. So we started to believe in these montages because of the momentum and the excitement. But, Rocky's a good example. If you watch the movie and watch what he's actually gone through, it's not just this great transformation and then he wins. He doesn't win, you
Right.
know.
Right. He lost against Apollo
Spoiler
Creed
alert
in the
for
first movie. Yeah, spoiler alert if you
spoiler alert.
haven't watched it yet.
Yeah.
Living under a rock.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
judgment.
But
Maybe a little.
but yeah, but it's a journey that really is just beginning.
Yeah.
So that montage is kind of the beginning of any real person's journey, because you put it beautifully, that people get all psyched up and they do everything in 3 minutes, and
Yeah.
then they're like, okay, this is too hard.
Yeah.
What's a remedy or a method to overcome that?
Yeah. So what I like to see, because we start in this place, and there's really a reason that it doesn't work. And Albert Einstein said that everything that's created is created twice. So first it's created in our mind, and then it manifests physically. So we're starting our comeback, and we're starting from this place, and we're still in the raw emotions. We haven't healed the past. We're just like starting from this go, which hasn't worked ever in the past. So now we're starting from go again. And we still have, the stories, the beliefs, the triggers, all of the traumas, all of the things from our past that have really brought us to where we are. So if we're creating our comeback and we're creating it from a disempowered state, well, our future is also going to look disempowered. And another reason why it's not working. And so in order to really create that future state from a more empowered state, I created what I like to call the Rocky inspired framework. Can we get into it?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. So R stands for rear view mirror. And that is, we really have to get right and to make peace with our past first. So many times we start from the doing, and I like to say it's imperative to start from the youing, and that we can't get into our DeLorean. We can't go back to the future. We can't change the past, but what we can do is make peace with it. And that's peace and forgiveness with the situation, any of the situations. It's peace and forgiveness with the other person. And then more importantly, it's peace and forgiveness with ourselves. That's one of the hardest things to do. But once you do that, it opens up. I mean, think about it. If you have ever had like a bad day or someone cut you off in traffic or whatever, what do? You ruminate, right? You just replay it over and over and over again. You think about it before you go to bed. You call your best friend. You're like, dishing like, oh my goodness, you're never going to believe what happened, and boppity boppity bop, right? You hang up. You're like, I still don't feel better. So you pick up the phone, you call the next best friend, like dish, boppity boppity bop, hang up. Still don't feel better. Like we ruminate over this stuff. And this is what collects over the years. We collect this stuff and we become tethered to it. We're like chained to it almost. And what forgiveness does is it breaks that chain. So instead of operating from that disempowered state, we are now operating from our true authentic self. And that's where we start. So that's our rear view mirror. O is own your ship with a P, like a boat. And this is responsibility. This is the one that these days, especially, everyone's like, ooh, responsibility. That's like not a popular thing to talk about.
Right.
So let's talk about it. I like to talk about the unpopular stuff. And this is really where it's not about blame or shame. It's about taking agency for your life from this point forward. And I learned this the hard way because in my past, I was the chief of staff for the FBI's counterintelligence program management office at a very high position there. And I was also a competitive mountain bike and triathlon racer. So a very competitive athlete. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 39 years old. Went through surgery, chemo, radiation, was diagnosed with autoimmune disease 1 year later, which then led into years of debilitating chronic fatigue to the point where I was pretty much bedridden and I was forced to resign from my dream job at the FBI. And what started that cascade was the very first appointment with my doctor. And because I'm like 39 years old, I weighed 110 pounds. Like I'm thin, I'm healthy, like I race competitively. Like, how did this even happen?
Yeah.
And she put her hand on my knee. And she want to know what she told me?
Yeah.
She said, lightning struck. And those two words were anchored into my soul. And anytime I was like, how did this even happen? I went back to that place of, oh, it's just a random act. I have nothing to do with this. So I made no changes and I kept living my life as if it was a random act. I needed to hear it. I needed that peace and that reassurance, but it's one of the worst things a doctor can say.
Yeah.
And because I didn't make any changes, I kept getting sicker and sicker. And what I realized is, disease doesn't just wake up and like, yeah, I don't like that Holly Bertone. So I'm going to make her life miserable, and then, throw down some Oprah, like, oh, here's some breast cancer. Oh, here's some autoimmune disease, right? What it is, disease is years. And we're talking cancer, autoimmune, diabetes, heart disease, all the big ones. It's not random. And it's years of chronic inflammation. And it's inflammation by our consumption, by our choices. And when I say consumption, it's not just what we eat, it's also what we drink. It's our thoughts. It's who we surround ourselves with. It's the negativity we surround ourselves with. It's the traumas that we carry. It's the environmental toxins. It's everything that we consume.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, and that's when I was like, I need to make a change. And the day that I took responsibility, and I had no clue what that was going to look like, I had no clue. I was like, I need to figure out how to heal myself because the doctors have completely failed me. And because they just look at a diagnosis and then they look at what pill goes with that diagnosis, and that's what they do. And so it was up to me to figure out, how can I heal myself? And that's what I was on a mission to do. And that's what I did. And it all started with responsibility. So that's how juicy good, despite how unpopular it is these days, that is how juicy good it is. Okay. Yeah. Are we ready for O?
Well, first of all, let's give us a second to digest that, because that revelation, that notion that of how personal this is, we would have gotten into that anyway, but I'm so glad you brought it up when you did, because the depth of the impact of our consumption, as you put it, on all of the things that happen, the midlife crisis, you kind of alluded to it in the beginning by saying this is an accumulation of a bunch of things that, are making us fall apart or contributing to it. So I think moving now onto the rest of the Rocky steps, we're going to have a little bit more of a hopefully a deeper appreciation for it. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned the hard way, so I like to teach the easy way.
Yeah.
So once we're like, so that is what I call the you-ing. That's the you-ing piece, right? Once we get that down, which is really the hardest part, the rest is smooth sailing. So we all do it backwards. We try to do first to become the you, but you got to you first and then do to go back to you, right? Mm-hmm. So the C is create your future self. So we can talk about goal setting, but what I really like to talk about is creating your future self and viewing that future self from a place of, do I want to lose 20, 30 pounds? Is this about vanity metrics? Is this about validation? Is it about the number between my two toes? Or is it about creating a future self who loves to eat healthy, nutritious food, who wants optimal metabolic health, who wants to operate from a place of peak performance, and especially with, the women in my community and anyone, by the time they get into their mid 30s and beyond should be thinking about longevity. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fun to play and have fun for a few years, but at some point it's time to start adulting and thinking about, okay, the decisions that I make today are going to impact how I live when I'm 60, 70, 80 and beyond, if you're lucky enough to live that long. So when you age, you can age from a place of brokenness and fragility, or you can age from a place of, optimal health and being able, like, there's a little, at my dad's retirement home, there's like a 88-year-old Mennonite lady. I mean, I'm 5 foot like nothing, and she's tiny, right? And she runs circles around all of us. I was like, I want that kind of energy.
Yeah.
So thinking of it from that long term and from that future self, but we also look at it from the day to day. And you and I talked about, like, we don't have attention spans anymore. So we look at a 1% growth and we're like, oh, that's nothing. No, it's a big deal. Celebrate. Or we look at a failure and we're like, oh, woe is me. I'm a horrible person. I'm a failure. I can't do that. No, celebrate. Because guess what? There's a coin. One side of the coin says failure. The other side of the coin says lesson. That's what you get to celebrate. You get to celebrate the fact that you figured something that doesn't work. You get to celebrate the door that was closed, because when that door is closed, there's a bigger one and better one that's open.
Right.
So that's C.
Yeah. And K?
K is keep the vision, not the view. And I will guarantee you with 100% certainty, 100%, this has never, ever failed me, that some obstacle is always going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Always. It doesn't, we can have the best of intentions and the best of days. So really it's looking at it from the perspective of the obstacles are always going to happen. So it's not about removing the obstacles and all of the stress that comes with those obstacles. It's redefining your relationship with that stress.
Right.
So that it doesn't matter what it doesn't affect your day. If it's raining outside, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to call my friend and walk around the house. I've got a little treadmill, but some people don't. Like, I'm just going to call a friend and walk around my house. I don't have to walk outside today. I'm running late. Well, guess what? Maybe I'm going to make food at home versus picking up some fast food on the way home. Like, these are decisions. And we get to a place after going through this framework, like, you get to a place where you love to do the healthy things. Like, it is a part of your lifestyle. And we can talk about nutrition and movement all day long, but until you address that stress, till you change your relationship and it continues to hijack you, right? It's always going to be that underlying theme. So that's why I love being a holistic health coach, to look at this holistically, but then also look at it, putting my FBI hat back on, finding those clues, how to put all of these pieces together. So that's okay.
Now, as a side note, because I'll forget otherwise, what prompted you to pursue a career with the FBI to begin with? Because when I read that in your bio, I've always found that interesting. I remember going to the FBI on a trip to DC when I was in junior high, and it was my favorite stop. It was like my favorite place to go. So tell me a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So when I was 7, so I grew up in a small town, like very insulated. And when I was 17, it was my senior year in high school. And we had to do like an equivalent of like a high school thesis. And I think my little innocent brain was just so enamored with how there can be evil in the world. Like, I just didn't understand that. I was like, I don't understand how people can be mean to each other. So I did my high school senior thesis on a behavioral profile on Charles Manson.
Oh, nice. I get it.
17 years old. And this was several years before Silence of the Lambs even came out.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. So I didn't even know that this existed. So that led to basically wanting to work, like a dream to work for the FBI. I majored in psychology in college. And then, I just kind of thought, well, I mean, who am I to work there? And, this is years before the internet. So I was like, well, I don't know how I'm ever going to work there.
Right.
And it just ended up being a series of random events that I basically was able to come in post 9/11 And yeah, it was a dream come true. And I actually got to, in a post 9/11 environment, they had the WMD Commission and the 9/11 Commission report come out from Congress stating how all of the agencies didn't talk to each other and then internally didn't talk to each other. And again, this was,
Right.
like 2001, like the internet was like a day old. So when I came in with my project manager hat on, nerd alert here. And so I was able to look internally, and I worked with different programs to take the disparate pieces and put them together. And then that turned into doing a lot of data analysis and trend analysis with some of the threats within some of those programs, and really focused in on the national security side of the house. So yeah, it was crazy ride to get there.
Yeah, that's fun, and it's insightful to hear about that. Okay, so now where are we in the Rocky? Are we on Y?
We are on Y, and really, like, that's how my brain works. I mean, I see patterns, I see trends. I like putting the puzzle pieces together. And that's what I do with my clients with holistic health coaching. And that why is really, it's bringing it home to you, YOU. And we can think about all of the heroes' journeys and all of our favorite movies. And at the end, they realize, like, oh, hey, I have this superpower inside of me all along.
Right, right.
Spoiler alert, every hero's
The
journey
Wizard of Oz,
has the same ending.
the Dorothy, I never go further than your own backyard.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
had the answer all along.
And that's really where it is. But I think it's something bigger than that too, because so often, and I don't see it as much in men, but I see it more in women, we apologize and we justify, right? Like, oh, I'm on a diet, I have to eat this salad, or, whatever. I don't like diets. So I'm a holistic coach who hates diets. I believe they're doing us a disservice. But anyway, but we do that, right? And that justification and that judgment and that apologizing and all of these things. So really, when you're able to come back home to you have that confidence, you have that determination. You're like that character on the other side of the montage. Like, you're standing a little taller. You're like, I've got this, right? You've got that empowerment. But it also means that the things that used to trigger you don't trigger you anymore. And you get to pass that on to other people. So when you're out with your friends and you're eating and they say something snarky, maybe well-meaning, maybe not, it doesn't bother you, right? Your stress doesn't get raised. You don't get in a fight. You don't, like, put on the fake face with your friend and then come home and have a fight with your spouse because you were mad at what your friend said, right? Things that normally happen like that don't happen anymore because you've broken those chains. And then you're able to give that gift to other people. Give it to your coworkers. Give it to your daughters, your sisters, and be able to give that gift of health, just having this healthy, happy lifestyle in whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, so when we started the conversation talking about, well, what is a comeback? What is a comeback story? And talked through the montage concept and how the Rocky program or approach really kind of addresses these things. Now somebody comes and somebody makes this comeback, and it could be like, when you think about like what a midlife crisis is. I mean, I'm 58, 57. So I feel like, I don't know, I probably had 3 midlife crises where I felt like, oh, this is the thing. This is where I'm changing now into a different person or whatever it is. A lot of it is just evolving as a person. Maybe your priorities changing, maybe maturing. But in terms of when you really have a comeback story, what sustains it? What keeps it going on and really sticking?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. And that's really what the framework does, and why we go do things backwards is to create that sustainability. And this is where, and I'll give you an example. You wake up and it's, pouring down rain. So you're like, oh, I was going to go to the gym today. It's pouring down rain. Well, you love the gym. Okay. Do you remember, like, the first time you fell in love?
Yeah.
Or sure. A time you fell in love?
Yeah.
Right. And you remember, like, you were obsessed with that love. Like, you would move mountains to be with that love. right?
Yeah.
Like if someone asks you to do something and you're like, oh no, I've got my plans. Like I'm not breaking these plans, right? Like
Right.
I'm hanging out with my special person, right?
Right.
Right. This is what it feels like. And this is where sustainability comes in, because it's not like this. I mean, we look, especially diet, exercise, we're like, oh my God, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. It feels heavy versus I get to do this. I want to do this. It's hanging out with the love of your life, because that love of your life is you. And it's
Yeah. Oh, wow.
feeding all of those things inside of you that make you healthy and happy. And that's what makes it sustainable. It's like you wake up, it doesn't matter if it's pouring down rain, freezing cold, you don't have any food in the house. You will move mountains to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah. And, you also will, when you're doing a diet, you're doing a short-term program, you're doing even a cleanse, whatever it might be. And you're like, well, when is this over?
Yeah.
When can I go back to,
yes,
to my routine or my life or whatever it is? We all know if you go back to something else, whatever you did is going to go away. It's really a lifestyle that has to change. It's your entire mindset. So you're saying this becomes a lifestyle and an identification
right.
that really, really gratifies you to the point where you will do anything to hold on to it, which is really awesome.
Absolutely. And Hirsch, I talked about the coin, and this is kind of the same thing. When we're operating from that old identity, there's the side of the coin of all the things that drain us. And when we think about, oh, I have to do this cleanse, or, oh, I have to do this thing, and we're like, oh, that's so draining, right? Or same coin, just flipped around. This gives me energy. This is something I want to do. This is something I get excited to do. That's where the sustainability comes in.
Yeah. And you mentioned, now I'll give you the last word, to let people know where to find you, but you also have a gift for us, as I understand it, right?
I do. Yes.
So share that with the audience, and then kind of take us out with a final thought. You've given us a lot of really good stuff to think about, but a final thought for those people that are feeling like they're a little bit stuck in this crisis mode, that they need to come back.
Oh, thank you so much, Hirsch. And yeah, if you're listening, if you love the Rocky Framework, I actually have a free private podcast training series, and you can go to podcastholly.com. And what we do is we go through the entire Rocky Framework in full detail. So there's one episode for each of the frameworks. So you can really dive into the framework to really start that journey on sustainable energy and weight loss and optimal vitality. And again, it's podcastholly.com, and you can get the Rocky Framework in a free private podcast training series.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes as well.
And then you said to a final word.
Yeah, just a final thought about comeback stories to kind of inspire the audience.
Yeah. And, when I was going through some of my roughest times, and there were words that I wanted to hear that I never heard, and I realized that I need to start saying them to myself. So every email that I send to my community, if you're on Instagram, every reel, every post, I end with this. And if you're on Instagram, come say hello. It's just my name, Holly Bertone. But I end with, you can do this. I believe in you. Because I needed to hear those words. And I think so many of us don't hear those words. And it's hard to believe in ourselves. And sometimes we just need to know that other people believe in us until we can find that belief in ourselves.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.